listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a diversified media enterprises production.
For WIN, I'm Joanne Powers. A tentative agreement reached late Saturday night between the SAG-AFTRA union and National Public Radio has averted a strike by over 400 news and programming workers. The deal was reached at the end of a 24-hour contract extension after almost 300 workers voted to seek strike authorization from the union's national board. The union says the deal provides for salary increases and effectively repelled efforts to erode union protections and institute a two-tiered salary system. The union had strenuously opposed plans by NPR to create a separate pay scale for new hires, demanding equal pay for equal work. The union expressed concern that such a policy would adversely affect the hiring of women and people of color. The workers have yet to ratify the 3-year contract. Workers at frozen food company Lamb Weston in Twin Falls, Idaho, have failed in their bid to form a union in an election that concluded on Saturday. Timothy Aceves, Secretary-Treasurer for Teamsters Local 483 in Boise, Idaho, says they were surprised to receive quite a few votes less than even the number of cards workers had originally signed in support of the union campaign.
I can only attribute that to the union busters, Craft Breezy, that had unfettered access for weeks at a time and mandatory meetings prior to the election. They were portraying the union as thugs, shysters that would tell the people what they wanted to hear in order to make something similar to a sale. And, of course, we're not salesmen. We're in a labor movement trying to provide a path for people to better their lives.
The union has filed a complaint with the National Labor Relations Board, alleging that the company and their consultants, Craft Breezy, participated in several unfair labor practices, such as threatening to close the plant if the workers voted to unionize, and pulling workers into supervisors' offices to discuss their union affiliation. The union is also moving forward with charging the company under Idaho's right-to-work statute. Daryl Hardenbrook, Director of Representation for Local 483, described the election as pretty ugly.
The state has allowed an outside company to come in and illegally threaten and coerce and badger and single out immigrants into thinking that if they do exercise their legal rights, harm could come to them. I wish people could see what I've seen in the last couple of months. It's appalling. I just can't believe that in 2017 this is allowed to happen. But we're not done. It's not over. It's not over.
Brought to you by the IBEW, 750,000 men and women powering the way for an American comeback. Information on how to become an International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Power Professional is online at ibew.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit workersindependentnews.com.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown it in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for tuning in. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. What a weekend it was. And, oddly enough, interestingly enough, bizarrely enough, you had the Trump lawyer doing all of the Sunday shows. Quite amusing, got to be honest. Quite amusing indeed. And I can't help but think of the Carl Sandburg quote that if the facts are against you, you argue the law. If the law is against you, you argue facts. And if the law and facts are against you, you pound the table and yell like hell. So I'm thinking about that. That's kind of right there as I'm watching Jay Sekulow give his thoughts, which evidently, and I love the Trumpian kind of frame. Because yesterday I had a couple of back and forth Twitter comments with Michael Caputo, the former Trump campaign guy, because he told me he was front and center in Cleveland. He was highly visible. He didn't hear anything about Russia. And I said, well, where I was on Radio Row, it was the hush buzz. It was the question that people were going, hey, Manafort, Stone, Caputo, hey, all of these people with these Russian ties, when's that going to drop? Why hush, hush. And I'd asked a number of people to talk about it. They wouldn't. And you go, it was the kind of open secret. And by the time you got to Cleveland, it was the open secret that the people and the Democrats were really talking about, because it was that apparent that they had these kind of ties. Now, was it collusion? I don't know. You look at this latest round of thoughts with Junior, and you got to kind of wonder. Now, I do like Sekulow's argument that, if there was something nefarious going on, to steal his quote, if there was something nefarious going on, I wonder why the Secret Service, if this was nefarious, why did the Secret Service allow these people in? He said the president had Secret Service protection at that point. That raised a question to me. But here's the thing. Maybe Trump had, and he did, Trump had Secret Service protection. Junior did not. And the U.S. Secret Service threw that out, which is so unusual. I mean, understand, we do not live in normal times. The U.S. Secret Service is generally the one nobody ever hears from. But what you've got right now is you've got the Secret Service going, oh, we're going to have to put out a statement. And they did to Reuters on Sunday, which a spokesperson said that, Donald Trump Jr. was not a protectee of the U.S. Secret Service in June of 2016. Thus, we would not have screened anyone he was meeting with at the time. And you go, why didn't? And stop and think about this from the Russians' perspective. If you buy that there was something here. People were going, well, why, if they had connections directly to Donald, why didn't they go right to Donald? Because he had Secret Service protection. I mean, come on. I mean, the reality is what it is. He had Secret Service protection, so they would have had to, check for at least guns, something. But Donald Jr. not. So this was a way to get to the president without actually going to him. And this is one of those moments where you start going, the pieces are starting to fall into place. And Michael Caputo's comments and thought process, which you've got to love, by the way, the ignorance defense. We were incompetent. We couldn't possibly have colluded with the Russians because we were that incompetent. It was so, bare bones and so non-political that, well, who would have thought to collude with the Russians? That's their defense. So just so you know, that's the defense that they're now using. Understand, you've got Sekulow who's going, well, the Secret Service should have stopped it. No, the Secret Service's job is to protect the body of the president, the bullets, knives, gas. The Secret Service is supposed to protect him from us, from people, from outside, not from himself. So understand that. This isn't, the Secret Service job is not about, hey, how do we protect his political future? No, it's about protecting his person, his body. So found it very interesting over the weekend to see that kind of fun and games and all of that. The other question then comes up. you look at the likes of Jared Kushner, who evidently now is, I guess, the one who threw him under the bus. Is that the story we're getting now? And it appears that, it appears that quite possibly, yes. So let me ask this, because at the other side of all of this comes the very real possibility that there was something going on. Every day last week we were seeing something new pop out. Every day last week there was another colonel. There was a Russian spy with the Russian lawyer that came from the Kremlin. And they left a binder behind it. It just wasn't, this person or that person. It was all of these people, and there were all these people in the room, and you start going, is Caputo right? Were these people just that incompetent? Were they just that dumb? And while I would like to say, yeah, probably, the reality is a lot of these ties go back years and years. And, to say that there was, this one moment of collusion and this 1 second is kind of ridiculous. And again, they want you to focus on, it was just this one thing. And, look, I'm saying quite simply that these ties have been in place for years. These ties have been there for decades. So to say that, there was this one moment and we weren't smart enough to figure out how to collude. No. It's the kind of ties that have bound our oligarchy class to theirs since the fall and really caused the fall. And they have both benefited wildly. That's the thing that gets me. Nobody really is focusing on this incestuous marriage between oligarchs in both countries, who don't really care about democracy, or they care about money. They care about their power, their influence, their access. They care about them. And at some point in this country, the hope is that we, and also in Russia, that people wake up to the reality that inequality is getting worse. The divide between the Trumps and the Russian oligarchs, the oil magnates, and Tillerson and the rest of them, and us is enormous. The gulf between the haves and the have-nots is growing greater every day. And right now we're looking at what's going on in the Senate with this healthcare debacle, where they're, with a straight face going, 22 million people uninsured, that's okay. Here, these crummy healthcare plans, don't worry about it. Going to give people choice. Going to be great. Creating a larger divide, because guess what? This isn't about healthcare. This is about more for the wealthy. It's that simple. We're not talking about how do we get people better access to care. We're not talking about how to set up systems to take care of people when they're ill. We're not talking about that. We're talking about tax cuts. We're talking about how much we can gut from the social safety net to give to rich people. In the hopes, and again, this is where they leave us that kernel of hope. In the hopes that if we give rich people more money, they'll create jobs and you'll be able to get one of those jobs, and maybe it'll have health insurance. That is, until you get sick. And then, we don't want to insure sick people, so die. This is what the conversation really is. All of the window dressing, all of the, there are real conservatives who have concerns. Nonsense. It's about tax cuts for rich people. Early death for poor people. And you break it down to what it actually is. And it's frustrating because, again, I go back to my high school government teacher who said, government decides who gets what. This government is deciding rich people get more, poor people get less. And as he pointed out, back in 9th grade, I think it was. Wow, that was a long time ago. As he pointed out back then, look, you got to decide which side of this divide you're on. Republicans are for the very rich and big business. Democrats are for the very poor and social programs. You folks in the middle, you middle class folks, you got to decide which one you're going to pay for, because you're paying for both. But you've got to decide which you're closer to. And this has been the great dilemma for the working class of this country, especially union workers who have done fairly well over the past several generations because they've, look, they made good money. They had good health care, good benefits. So they thought, hey, I'm closer to the top. I'm closer to the investor class. I'm closer to the wealthy. I have money. Until that union job goes away, and then they become the poor again. And then it's, hey. This is the reality of the world that we live in. And again, I think back to that lesson in 9th grade. You got to decide which one you're closer to. Are you closer to being the billionaire, flying in the private jet, playing golf on your private course, being ushered in and out of the U.S. Women's Open, and then saying, hey, everybody here loves me? Yeah, I didn't see any coal miners in the front row. Didn't see any steel workers or truck drivers, doing the tennis clap. Didn't see that. I saw a bunch of, really snobby white rich people who have had so much handed to them because we've got a political class that believes they should have more. And I'm okay with them having more, as long as that doesn't mean that the rest of us get absolutely less or nothing at all. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Was it an interesting weekend? What are you expecting in the days ahead? We here at the program going to be taking Wednesday off as a travel day, heading to Washington, D.C. for the American Federation of Teachers Teach Conference. We'll be broadcasting Thursday and Friday from there. Look forward to your thoughts. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, Propane Jane going to give us a bit of sanity. Quick break. Right back.
All of my life I have searched for clarity. I have wrestled with two paths buried deep inside of me. I lost some rounds, been knocked around, felt my share of defeat. Yet somehow I've always managed to get back on my feet.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. The Teamster members of Local 574 in Minneapolis were back out on strike. Their strike had begun 2 months prior on May 16th. The striking Teamsters had effectively shut down much of the commercial transportation in the city. One exception was made for some farmers who were allowed to bring their produce to market. The powerful Citizens Alliance, created to oppose and destroy unions, tried to defeat the strike. The police clashed violently with the strikers, who tried to keep scab drivers from breaking through their picket lines. As the strike entered its second week, other unions began to strike in support of the Teamsters. Clashes between the police and workers intensified. Minneapolis labor leaders sat down with the police and proposed a truce. The governor of Minnesota, Floyd Olson, helped to arbitrate an agreement. The Teamsters won union recognition and the right for all strikers to return to work, as well as a system of recognizing seniority. On May 25th, they called off the strike and went back to work. But soon the employers began to backpedal on the agreement. They claimed that the negotiations did not include the workers inside warehouses and only covered those who drove and unloaded vehicles. Angered, the Teamsters went back out on strike. Soon, violent clashes between the picketers and police broke out again. 2 workers were shot in the back and killed. The governor declared martial law and sent in the National Guard to restore order. A federal mediator brokered another settlement meeting the major demands of the union. It was a major victory for the Teamsters and a major victory for the workers of Minneapolis and beyond. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Sanity and rational thought back to America. Rick Smith.
Well, this week we saw another bad, made for straight to YouTube reality show. The As the Trump Turns, a tragic tale of deceit, betrayal, and idiocy. Every day, some new revelation. And in the latest episode, it's believed that son-in-law Jared Kushner has thrown favorite prodigal son Junior under the proverbial bus, and the hilarity ensues. You can't even make up that kind of a bad script for a straight-to-YouTube video. I really, you can't. Yet this is the direction our nation has taken. And look, I agree with the former ethics guy, Schwab, who said, we're becoming the laughing stock of the world. Anyway, here to talk about the latest, the machinations of insanity that we see coming out of our White House, our good friend Propane Jane. Jane, thanks for taking time for us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me back.
So
it gets worse every week. I mean, if we were to draw a graph of these conversations, I think it would just be downhill every week in terms of what we're discussing, right?
It does. It just seems like the train wreck that you cannot turn away from.
Yeah, it's terrible.
And, I look at this latest bit with Junior last week coming out and preemptively releasing his emails that basically answered every question that people, who said there was collusion going on, answered all the questions. Yes, it was there. He met with a Russian attorney who brought a Russian spy. Left documents. You don't need to be Magellan to follow this map.
Yeah, and again, these are telltale emails, right? Much of what we have learned about what happened has actually come from the Trump team. They have actually told more on themselves than really the authorities have told about them. Yep. And actually, I think it's the things that they say about what they've done, or the accusations that they are casting onto other people. Again, that draws so much attention to what actually happened that, the collective fervor to just get the actual facts is what brings about, more investigation, and then more information comes out. So it really is just a cycle that is devolving, but that is also, ripping up the floorboards in a lot of ways.
It's nuts. And I go back to something my grandfather always used to tell me. He goes, if you're messing up, I used a different word, but if you're messing up, make sure you're the only one who knows you're messing up, because then you've only got about a 50% chance of getting ratted out.
Well, absolutely, and that's a great lead-in to the topic that I've been discussing this last week, which is the nepotism factor. And necessarily, Trump has surrounded himself with people who aren't competent simply because they are his family and they are of most help to him. And in a lot of ways, the fact that he is maintaining them within his administration despite their incompetence really makes you wonder, well, why is he still hanging on to them? Is this just the bonds of family? Or is there something bigger there? In my most recent piece in Daily Kos that came out yesterday is called POTUS by Proxy. And it's just sort of a juxtaposition of the Reagan administration and how his family and his wife in particular, Nancy Reagan, acted as POTUS by proxy. And people didn't necessarily know that's what they were doing at the time. But in the intervening years, as we've discovered that Reagan actually had dementia, people are starting to be more curious about, okay, well, how much, involvement did they actually have in the policies and what was actually happening? And so just to kind of compare that to what's happening right now, he has all of these people who can be witnesses because he has caregivers, and they just so happen to be, the Three Stooges, which are his oldest children. And they know a lot about what he's done, but they're also tied by, loyalty within the family to protect him and to, go down and fall on the sword if they need to preserve, their brand and his image.
And their inheritance.
Absolutely, right? The whole family dynamic, it rests with him looking like, he's a legitimate person, looking like he's a successful businessman, and that he's competent and looking like he really won this election, despite the fact that we know there was Russian interference. And so the collusion that's happening within their family, again, is just this, fomenting of these grandiose delusions, and then also doing everything they can to protect the sociopathy that is happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, I mean, but you would hope with this much on the line, they would do a better job because, and look, I agree with you completely that, they're the caregivers. They're supposed to be the ones to insulate them, to protect them because, look, there's clearly something going on.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing a pretty crummy job at it. Maybe he could hire somebody else. And like even the lawyers, he just has a really bad track record of surrounding himself with the most incompetent people.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think that is indicative of the fact that when you're dealing with someone who is this dysfunctional, they are unable to hire competent people. Right now, we have hundreds of government positions that are going unfilled because nobody wants to be associated with this administration. Not just the guise of corruption, but also just the rank incompetence. And what is this going to do for their career long term if they are tied to this administration in any way? And it looks very bad. And so even as we've seen with his lawyer, Kasowitz, he is surrounding himself with people who share his, personality traits and share his same,
bully.
Dysfunctional mode of conflict resolution.
Yeah, did you see the Kasowitz emails? I mean, did you hear about this? You go, really?
Yes.
You're one of the top lawyers in your field. And yet you're going to go after somebody with the kind of foul language and threats that came out. It's really insane.
It is. And again, if you think about who Trump is as a person, it makes sense that that's who his lawyer would be. It makes sense that, when you look at the history of what his lawyers have put forward, to the public, it's always been this level of just sociopathy, this level of arrogance and entitlement and disdain for just common etiquette and decorum. And I think that that's a function of the fact that that's how he wants them to be. And he wants them to exude those same characteristics because he sees that as powerful. And it has worked for him. Unfortunately, this is something that makes people back off. I mean, the person that sent Kasowitz those emails, forwarded them to the FBI. But think what kind of, fear that does still instill at some point, right? I mean, yes, you can go, okay, yes, this is just bluster. But is that person now walking around going, is some goon from Russia or from who knows where going to show up at his front door someday?
Yep. No, I mean, it's a very real, and as I was reading through some of the emails, the threats, and look, this person just, sent an email that most people like me would just go, let it go, blowing off steam, let it go.
Yeah.
But this guy had to, we're coming after you. I know who you are. You're giant F word with me now. Watch your back. You B word. Radio can't get into the language on here.
Right.
But you go, this is probably like a $300 an hour, $500 an hour attorney.
Mm-hmm.
Really, out of your day, you're going to take that? Really?
That much time, right? And then he says, and then ultimately when they issued his apology, non-apology, they said, oh well, he's too busy dealing with other matters to speak to this directly. So the person delivering the statement was just a spokesperson. Okay, but you had the time to reply like 5 times to this guy's email.
And obsessed. I mean, and this kind of, this obsession.
Right, but this is also, again, this mirrors what Trump does, right? I mean, when he gets incensed about something that he sees in the quote-unquote fake news, he begins tweeting ad nauseum, right? And he's just, doubling down on the same insults because he feels infuriated. And he wants to get those feelings out so that people will feel discouraged from speaking out against him in the future.
Here's the thing. I mean, and I don't know if you saw Trump's other lawyer, Jay Sekulow, over the weekend saying that, that the Secret Service should protect Donald Trump. And there's part of me that goes, maybe there's some thought in his head that everybody is his grand protector. It just seems very strange to me. All of these pieces and all of these characters, it's a very Shakespearean, almost just bizarre kind of play.
It is, and he demands loyalty to Donald Trump, And if you are not loyal to him, then you're not a part of the process, and he's going to throw you under the bus. I mean, he makes that very well known, and he has that in common with, dictators and monarchs throughout history who share some of these same megalomaniac personality traits. And so again, I think what makes this so difficult is, like if you think about mob movies, and when they get the guy who's sort of lower down on the totem pole and he's there in the interrogation, that person in their mind is worried that they're going to, be labeled as a snitch. And that if they do, they always want to go into witness protection, right? Because they are fearful of retaliation for the information that they've given. And so a lot of, I think, what's happening right now in terms of the message that is being put out from the Trump campaign in the midst of these allegations is to still be very bombastic so that, the whistleblowers who are involved will just feel very worried about speaking out and make them less likely to flip, quote unquote. And so, I think that it's already past a point of that working, considering the fact that we're talking about people like Comey, for instance, who's the FBI director, and people that have now been involved in the process and been made privy to what he is doing behind the scenes and the corruption and the obstruction of justice, that these are people who are not easily going to be backed down. And they have kept really dutiful records. And it really just is a matter of stringing all of that information together because the trail seems to be there, and it seems to extend for miles and miles and miles.
And it just keeps every day it keeps getting bigger and bigger, and they keep ratting themselves out more and more. It's rather kind of comical, but the sad reality is we're still talking about how far in just such a short period of time our standing in the world has fallen. And
the fact that just the Republican Party just really does not seem to care. And I think that part is so disheartening because, for whatever the policy disagreements, you still would hope that at the end of the day we still have some pride in our country and can put country first.
Right. We heard a lot about that during the McCain years.
We sure did, right?
I had this conversation over the weekend of someone who said, our Constitution never imagined a president like this. I go, that's not true. Our Constitution absolutely imagined a president like this. They never imagined a Congress like this, though. I mean, look, I think they wrote the Constitution to make sure we don't get a president like this. I just don't think they ever envisioned a Congress that would have turned a blind eye.
And also the other question is, did they envision electoral college electors who could see someone as unfit, and despite their Republican Party affiliation, still go, hey, this is not what's in the best interest of the country. Is that sort of the naivete that they were dealing with, or has our society just devolved to the point where that they want to win at all costs, and they really don't necessarily care how much, risk they're putting the country or the world in. And I think they've demonstrated that over the last 6 months.
Yeah, does it matter to you if the collusion was just being naive, or if it was just, lifelong ties of, we're friends and it's how it always, or if it really was, we're seeking, as Donald Jr. said in the emails, I'd love it if you had, dirt on Hillary Clinton. Does it matter to you?
No. I mean, I think the second that that they received that inquiry, their response is very telling as to how they operate. And I think in addition to that, if you go back and you look at the videos from that time, if you put your mind back into May, June, July 2016, and you look at the callous way that they went out and they projected all of what they were doing behind the scenes onto Hillary Clinton. It was a very premeditated effort that they were engaged in to put this information out there and to make it seem as though she was doing all the stuff that they were actually doing. And so I think the cynical and very criminal way that they've done this with the propaganda aspect, again, I don't really care how they tie it up and whatever bow they put on it, but the behaviors and the actions that they took, I think, speak for themselves.
Yeah. Do you buy the Michael Caputo line that it was a big giant S show and that they were too busy and basically they were too incompetent to collude with the Russians? Do you buy that?
No, I don't. I think that that what is coming more to light is not just that sort of the Keystone Trumps were involved, that also the entire Republican Party stood to benefit from this hacked information. And from what we know, there are even tapes of Paul Ryan and Representative Kevin McCarthy, discussing, someone being in receipt of this hacked information. And so what we are talking about is something that extends past the Oval Office. It extends past POTUS by proxy. It is something that an entire political party has benefited from. And I think when you're looking at any crime that's been committed, you have to look at who has benefited from the crime. Where is the fruit of the poisonous tree? And it doesn't just stop at Trump and his family. There are other people, Mike Pence. When you talk about Flynn, Mike Pence was the leader of the transition team. And we know that, Elijah Cummings tried to, get some information from Mike Pence in regards to Mike Flynn's, security clearance and, dealing with foreign agents, and that he was just, pretending to be unaware of all of this. And so I really honestly think that the ratcheting up of just this insanity from the Trump team is the anxiety they feel over knowing this investigation is ongoing and just feel like not knowing at any moment, like where, when are they going to come for me? When are they going to come with the handcuffs?
Yeah, well, that's that guilty conscience, right?
Right, exactly. And I know people, feel like someone like Trump is incapable of feeling that. But as human beings, we are aware of the actions that we've taken. And if we've taken actions that people are now aware of and are calling into question, even if we don't have any remorse over the actions we took, or even if we feel like we did the right thing, you're still going to have some ruminating about the fact that other people are feeling some sort of way about it. And what's driving Trump, to this, just level of like obsession with the probe and obsession about tweeting, about the investigation as it's ongoing, is that he's worried about being implicated. He's worried about being indicted, and he's worried about being convicted.
Yeah. Which is why you look at just a couple of minutes ago, the president tweeted out that most politicians would have gone to a meeting like the one Don Jr. attended in order to get info on an opponent. That's political, was his tweet. And the reality is no, I don't think most politicians would. But it's that justification, that constant trying to justify it, that I think highlights your point.
And I think that also highlights the reality of what has actually happened. Because, again, with the timeline, it has gone from, okay, none of this, interaction with Russia ever occurred. We don't even know them. They never talked to us. We never talked to them. To now, okay, certain people talked to them, but then I didn't know that they talked to them, and then they didn't tell me until later. Then now there was no meeting, and then, okay, yes, there was a meeting, and then now it's, okay, there was a meeting, but it was a shrewd thing to do, right? And so it has, moved along this path where now they're trying to intellectualize it and justify it, and they don't even realize how far they've come because, just months ago they were claiming that none of this ever even happened.
Exactly.
And so I think that aspect of the fact that now, he feels the need to, make it look like something good actually came from this, and that this is just him being, the beauty of Donald Trump, the outsider that does everything in some unique way. That's to overcompensate for the embarrassment. I think ultimately all of them feel at the fact that they've been found out and they're so incompetent.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's top to bottom. And I look at the statements over the weekend of Kellyanne Conway, who said, the criticism of her is, it's gender-based. It's because I'm a woman. That's why they're attacking me. It's because she's a woman.
No, it's because you're lying through your teeth every opportunity you get, and we know it, right? I mean, but again, she can't accept that, right? So there has to be like all of these other explanations for why she is the one that's being persecuted, when really, she's just upset that we're not buying her propaganda.
Yeah, I mean, did you see the video? And here's the audio from. Listen to this.
Okay. See it so far. This is to help all the people at home. What's the conclusion? Collusion? No, we don't have that yet. I see illusion and delusion. So just so we're clear, everyone, 4 words. Conclusion, collusion, no. Illusion, delusion, yes. I just thought
you'd throw that out there. Now, the important word there was yet. There's not collusion yet. Was that a Freudian slip?
She's basically saying, it's like a game of Clue, right? I mean, she has the envelope where she knows, who did what, where, and with what instrument, right? And she's just sort of goading us for not having all of the correct answers together yet.
I mean, I just look at this, and again, if it weren't the future of our democracy and the balance, if it weren't ripping us apart at the seams, if it weren't policies that make inequality so much worse, if it weren't 23, 22, 20 million people uninsured in the next couple of years, this would all be a joke. It'd be laughable. It'd be comedy. But the reality is that while all of this insanity is going on and all of this nonsense happens, there are very deadly consequences.
Because again, divide and conquer. While this poop storm is happening every day, you have the GOP Congress that is just salivating over, bringing the worst of their draconian agenda to life in Congress, while all of this, everybody's, looking at the shiny thing. And so that is the danger of this entire administration. And that's why I always say that they're a poison pill, regardless, because whether they pass legislation or not, which we've seen, it's been 6 months, they haven't really passed anything.
Thank goodness.
This is still the devolution of American democracy, and it's happening every day. And every day that we are consumed with this, we are not moving forward. We are not improving Obamacare. We are not rebuilding our roads and bridges. We are not ensuring that our infant mortality rate, decreases. So we're not doing any of the things that, as a nation, we should have been doing a long time ago.
Agreed.
And so I think ultimately Putin's strategy is, right now he can still say mission accomplished, even though no one's been, sort of indicted or, even really, we haven't confirmed anything, quote unquote. As
so
they say,
last question I've got for you then. I mean, because there is all of this and there's this kind of frustration. How do we pull this back together? What's an action that people can do to kind of bring us, start thinking about, healing that divide?
I think that what we have to do is just think about the next election in terms of what's at stake. In terms of like this next election really could be one of our last, somewhat free and fair elections, because we already know they're not free and fair. And so the sense of urgency we have right now to repair as much as we can, in the voting booth needs to be there to mobilize for 2018. But then we also need to be, staking out in our representatives' office, because they are trying to pass things as we speak that are going to have detrimental, effects for decades to come. And so as much as we can stop in the here and now, we need to do that too.
Organize for the next election. Get involved. Jane, appreciate the time. Always great talking with you.
You the same. Have a great week.
You as well, our good friend Propane Jane. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
We gotta get organized. We gotta do it today. No more madness, confusion. No more disarray. We gotta get organized.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, for Talk Media News. Is President Trump coming in from the cold? The president is on a state visit to France, and during remarks with President Emmanuel Macron on Thursday, he suggested that the U.S. withdrawal from the Paris Agreement on climate change might not happen after all.
Yeah, I mean, something could happen with respect to the Paris Accord. We'll see what happens. And if it happens, that'll be wonderful. And if it doesn't, that'll be okay, too.
After weekend meetings with members of the G20, perhaps Trump is coming around to the consensus position on climate change. Even House Republicans seem to be doing so. On Thursday, 46 of them voted alongside Democrats to protect a bill that mandates that the Pentagon study the risks posed to the military by climate change. And 8 of the world's largest aid groups have launched a joint appeal to alleviate an ongoing famine in 4 countries. Deepmala Mehila is the country director for Mercy Corps in South Sudan.
The famine-like conditions, what we are seeing right now in South Sudan, Somalia, Northeast Nigeria, and Yemen, is unbelievably urgent and huge in scope. We are talking about 20 million people being on the brink of starvation, and another 80 million people do not know where their next meal is coming from.
Some United Nations humanitarian officials have characterized the current world hunger crisis as one of the worst since World War II. It's a sentiment that Mehila understands.
The situation is more dire than ever. You go to the field, I meet women and families who've lost everything. And when I mean everything, I mean everything.
To lend a hand or donate to famine relief efforts, visit globalemergencyresponse.org. For more global news headlines, visit talkmedianews.com.
The most important issues of the day. This is The Rick Smith Show.
Back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Yes, it's all because she's a woman. That's why people are angry with Kellyanne Conway. That's the reason that they don't treat her nicely. It's because she's a woman. Yeah. Not that every word, syllable, vowel comes out of her mouth is factually questionable. No, never mind that. It's because she's a woman. That's it. Yeah. Anyway, let's find out what's going on in Washington, D.C. and around the world. Victoria Jones, Talk Media News. Victoria, thanks for taking time for us.
You're so sexist.
What's that?
You're so sexist.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Is it wrong for a man to say that it's not? Is that one of those things that I'm not allowed to say?
It's still questioning what's wrong. You see, that shows how sexist you are, that you don't instinctively know.
Ah. Okay.
What's right and wrong, you see?
Got it.
You see?
And I've never walked a mile in her pumps, so I don't really know then.
See, you say it's pumps, don't you?
Yes, I do.
How do you know she doesn't wear strappy sandals?
I don't think they would match with the outfits she normally wears.
Or flats.
Well, could be. No, because I've actually seen her wear pumps in the past.
She does wear pumps. I think she wears strappy sandals. I'm trying to see. I saw her in the Rose Garden a few weeks ago, and she's quite tiny, actually.
Yeah. And I would assume you would wear those to kind of make her taller.
Well, that's strappy sandals do the same thing.
See, I didn't even know what those were, so I just thought they were sandals.
I didn't think you did because you're a galumph.
Okay. I've been called worse.
I heard laughter in the background.
There was. Anytime someone calls me a name, my wife jumps on their side.
Yes, she liked galumph.
She does.
Yes.
She wants to know how to spell it.
I just made it up, so I'm going to spell it Galumph.
All right, gonna put that H in there. Got it.
Galumph.
Got it. All right. That's right there with the blazing saddles, harumph. I get it.
Yes, galumph.
Got it. All right, so good.
Galumph,
good.
Galumph, yes.
Lots of good stuff. So we repealing Obamacare this week? What's going on?
Oh, I don't think so. Do you?
No.
I mean, why this week when we can wait until next week and keep the suspense?
I'm in favor of keeping them, just kind of dithering as long as possible. No vacation for them. Let them be like the rest of the American people. No vacations for these people.
No vacation for you. They should bring on board the soup Nazi.
I'm with you. In fact, they should have to work for a temp agency.
I've worked for a temp agency.
Yeah, I've heard stories. That's not good.
No, I've worked for a temp agency. I've worked for a temp agency in London in the summer, and I can tell you.
That's why one of my favorite
pretty.
billionaires is founder of one of the largest temp agencies. His job was outsourcing. That's why he's one of my favorite billionaires. He made his money screwing working people.
We had regular British girls going around London.
All right.
On the tube without air conditioning in the summer. Yeah.
Uphill both ways.
Wearing heels.
Uphill both ways.
Yeah.
Might as well. Did you eat dirt too?
Yeah, we ate dirt and we lived in a hole in the road.
All right, got it.
Okay, so back to the health bill. No, because Senator John McCain is out for at least a week, possibly longer. We don't know which way he was going to. He's very likely going to vote for, but we don't know. Senator Susan Collins said on the Sunday shows yesterday she thinks there are 8 to 10 Republicans who are undecided. She's a no. Rand Paul is a no for different reasons. There are others who are possible no's, and this isn't even on the bill, as you know. This is just to vote whether to talk about the bill.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty amazing, isn't it? It's that bad they didn't even want to talk about it.
Yeah, they don't even want to talk about it.
Well, not in Rand Paul's case. In Rand Paul, he wants it much worse.
He
it's not bad enough.
Yeah. Now that we're waiting for 2 Congressional Budget Office scores. The first one probably tomorrow. That's already been delayed. Probably tomorrow, which is likely to be better than the last one. But then there's another one. This is the truly terrible one, which everybody's pretending is sort of not going to happen, and it's expected to be so bad that I think this may be the reason. I don't know this, but a couple of Republican leadership did an op-ed in one of the big serious papers over the weekend saying, well, Congressional Budget Office scores, rubbish.
Yeah.
So basically they're telling us to take no notice of them, probably for the one tomorrow, but also mostly for the Ted Cruz one, because the Ted Cruz amendment is expected to really drive up the cost of this bill. And so, in fact, according to a Politico article that came out early last week, the Republicans are considering going forward with the vote and not relying on the Congressional Budget Office score for the Cruz amendment, but using their own internal scoring.
Oh, yeah. That's always fun.
Yeah.
Let's just make some stuff up and slap it on a page. Who cares? By the time anyone notices, we'll have already robbed the till.
That's
nice.
One way of looking at it.
Great. Okay, let's move on. Campaign collusion, yes or no? Are you enjoying the kind of bad reality show straight to YouTube video that we're seeing out of this administration over these emails and little Junior? And I guess just a couple minutes ago, the president tweeted out that anybody would have taken the meeting that Junior did. Anybody would have done it.
Well, we went from many people to most people to now it's just about anybody to soon it'll be everybody did take the meeting.
Exactly.
Because seeing as we're going up in numbers of how many were at the meeting, soon it'll be everybody was there.
You're right, because it was just originally wasn't it just Junior and the woman lawyer, and then you find out that Manafort and Kushner was there, and then there was a Russian spy. I'm waiting for Boris and Natasha to show up.
I think they were there.
And Bullwinkle.
Somebody had to be taking the notes. I mean, it's what I thought was interesting, because I watched a good bit of the Hannity interview until I couldn't anymore.
Yeah.
And but I did see the bit where he said at the end, "Well, I don't have any more questions to ask," and I'm going, "Are you kidding me?" Because I've got questions. I'm climbing through the set at this point,
Yeah, that's because, again, you didn't start with your answers to begin with, with where you wanted that to end up. You actually have probing questions of things that are of interest. And that's not the Hannity thing.
Oh, I see. Okay, point. Anyway, so Donald Trump Jr. said during that interview that, in the interest of transparency, that's what we did. And so everything's out. Everything's out now. And it was after that NBC News and the AP reported, everything except for the former Soviet military intelligence officer was out.
Yeah, oops. And then, what about the folder? What about the documents that may have been left behind? Maybe they were just left on a desk somewhere and the cleaners walked away with it.
Yeah, with the borscht. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to today. I want to see what else happens today.
It's Made in America week.
It is Made in America, with all of the Ivanka stuff made in China and Bangladesh and Indonesia and all over the place.
We are having today, or this afternoon actually, we don't know what they are yet, but we are having items from every state in the Union on the South Lawn, and in fact we're having Marine One, which is made in Connecticut, landing on the South Lawn, having items from every state in the Union being showcased for the press. And I think the president's going to make remarks, too, about items, about things that are made in America.
And how tremendous they are.
How tremendous. They're tremendous.
Yep. No, I wonder how many of them will be his. Oh, yeah, none, because he doesn't make anything in the U.S.
Well, no, I think he might make some, but Ivanka Trump makes none.
Right.
And we are having a briefing today, and it is Sean Spicer. The Spice Man is back.
All right.
But it is off camera.
Ah.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, again, I keep going back to why don't you guys just with the smartphone things, you just hold up the phone. I mean, everything on YouTube.
I mean, wouldn't you think? I know, but wouldn't you think really that? Wouldn't you think you'd want to get your story out? Particularly Made in America Week, wouldn't you think you'd want to get that story out and make it public?
Yeah, I would think.
I would think.
See, but now if you've got Made in America Week, then you start having people like me ask questions. Or, okay, I'm all in favor of it. Outside of having the flashy display and the printer who got to make the sign and all of that, what are you doing to move that forward? What are our procurement policies? Why do we give so many exemptions to the Berry Amendment? Why does our military have to rely on smart chips from China and magnets from China? Why aren't we figuring out how we do stuff at home? To me, that again, it's nice to have the little display and the feel good moment. Oh, Made in America Week. Oh. What are we doing to move forward to actually make it in America?
Well, I think those questions will be asked.
On camera? No.
Not on camera,
Not on camera. All right. Well, that's good stuff then. I hope that happens. So there you go. Now let's move on to voting. What about the big Integrity Commission? A lot of states saying, no, we're not giving you our information. What's going on?
Well, yes, a lot of states saying no. We're not. Well, all the states actually saying no. I'm not giving you the information, and just about all the states saying no. I'm not giving you the information. Well, what actually happened then was that the White House said, but well, as you do, said, well, what we'd like is, we'd like people to provide their public comments. Give your comments. We're interested. We want to hear your comments. So people started to email in their comments. And what they didn't realize when they emailed in their extremely voluble comments like, in caps, do not release any of my voter data, period. And the request for private voter information is offensive, and other comments that I can't repeat.
Yeah.
They were all published publicly by the White House, including, in some cases, just name and email address, in some cases, name, email address, phone number, physical address, place of employment.
Wow.
I don't know about brass eyes, but,
Wow, that's really not right.
No, I don't think they had that. But if they had,
they would have released it.
I don't know. But, I mean, Vice President Pence's press secretary said, well, we published the details that we were going to be doing this in the Federal Register. Here's the thing. They published the stuff in the Federal Register. The Federal Register published it on the 5th of July. On the 5th of June, I believe it was. And then they published it on the 13th. Most of these emails, or at least over half of the emails that they published, were dated before the 5th. So they could not have seen the guidance because it didn't exist.
Huh. So is it the Russians?
No, it's just that the guidance was not, when the people wrote these emails, they had not published the guidance saying that we may publish your information.
Oh, okay. I get what you're saying then.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
They didn't
look, you
know
made the
that it would
comment.
be
It's public.
published.
We're telling the world.
Right.
Crazy.
They didn't know that they were going to put their place of work there so that everybody could come and, go postal on them.
Yeah, well, I mean, the point is that you'll never do it again. Victoria, appreciate the time.
Thank you so much.
Great talking to you, Victoria Jones. Talk Media News. You'll never make another comment again. There you go. Right back. Stick around.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a diversified media enterprises production.
For WIN, I'm Joanne Powers. A tentative agreement reached late Saturday night between the SAG-AFTRA union and National Public Radio has averted a strike by over 400 news and programming workers. The deal was reached at the end of a 24-hour contract extension after almost 300 workers voted to seek strike authorization from the union's national board. The union says the deal provides for salary increases and effectively repelled efforts to erode union protections and institute a two-tiered salary system. The union had strenuously opposed plans by NPR to create a separate pay scale for new hires, demanding equal pay for equal work. The union expressed concern that such a policy would adversely affect the hiring of women and people of color. The workers have yet to ratify the 3-year contract. Workers at frozen food company Lamb Weston in Twin Falls, Idaho, have failed in their bid to form a union in an election that concluded on Saturday. Timothy Aceves, Secretary-Treasurer for Teamsters Local 483 in Boise, Idaho, says they were surprised to receive quite a few votes less than even the number of cards workers had originally signed in support of the union campaign.
I can only attribute that to the union busters, Craft Breezy, that had unfettered access for weeks at a time and mandatory meetings prior to the election. They were portraying the union as thugs, shysters that would tell the people what they wanted to hear in order to make something similar to a sale. And, of course, we're not salesmen. We're in a labor movement trying to provide a path for people to better their lives.
The union has filed a complaint with the National Labor Relations Board, alleging that the company and their consultants, Craft Breezy, participated in several unfair labor practices, such as threatening to close the plant if the workers voted to unionize, and pulling workers into supervisors' offices to discuss their union affiliation. The union is also moving forward with charging the company under Idaho's right-to-work statute. Daryl Hardenbrook, Director of Representation for Local 483, described the election as pretty ugly.
The state has allowed an outside company to come in and illegally threaten and coerce and badger and single out immigrants into thinking that if they do exercise their legal rights, harm could come to them. I wish people could see what I've seen in the last couple of months. It's appalling. I just can't believe that in 2017 this is allowed to happen. But we're not done. It's not over. It's not over.
Brought to you by the IBEW, 750,000 men and women powering the way for an American comeback. Information on how to become an International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Power Professional is online at ibew.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit workersindependentnews.com.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So over the weekend, my email box filled with right-wingers who don't seem to understand what net neutrality is or what its departure would mean, but they know they're against it. They're against it because, well, it was something that happened under the Obama years. And look, I look at the emails and they spent, it was almost universal. Like there was someone behind it saying, point there, go. They were hammering me for being in bed with the Russians. Yeah. Because according to them, the Russians want net neutrality so they can steal our elections. You know, the elections that they didn't meddle in 2016, according to them. And while it's fun, a little bit of discourse, the sad thing is that there's very real consequences to ending a free and open internet. And here to talk about what a departure from net neutrality might look like for small businesses, I've asked Angela Saman to come talk with us. She's the communications director with the Main Street Alliance and the Main Street Alliance Action Fund. Angela, thanks for taking time for us. Okay, guess she's not there. Angela? Hello? I think we lost her. But here's the thing. I mean, when you look at some of these emails, which is fantastic, by the way, the funny thing was that it's the Russians who want net neutrality because they want a free and open internet so they can do, what they did during 2016, which is just nonsense. I mean, the idea of a free and open internet is one of these moments where you go, they have, once we give Comcast and, AT&T and whomever the kind of power to dictate based on pricing what gets into our eyes, what gets onto our screens, you end up in very real danger. And again, I go back to this is very harmful to small business. And I guess we've got Angela back. Angela, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you so much. Sorry about that. We're having some technical difficulties on my end.
Anytime you deal with live radio, you have those things. But here's the thing. You look at this and all of the voices who are supportive of ending net neutrality and basically handing over control to the ISPs. I've been hit with this idea. What's the Russians? And I'm going, no, the Russians don't. They may want that, but we should want it too because it's dangerous to business, isn't it?
It's absolutely dangerous to business, Rick. And I think it's kind of funny that the other side is arguing that this benefits the Russians, given that Russia is a prime example of a place where internet censorship and true government overreach routinely leads to all sorts of problems on the internet. Net neutrality fundamentally is about anti-censorship. I like to think of it as the First Amendment of the internet. And for small businesses, that really means that they're able to reach the whole world as a customer base with their products freely and openly. And it really means that having an open internet, having net neutrality means that they have a chance to compete with the big guys. Taking away those rules, taking away the net neutrality rules, that is, returns us to a time when a handful of internet service providers, Verizon, AT&T, and Comcast, are really acting as digital robber barons. They're charging people, what is it, like $100 a month at your home for internet access. But then they would be allowed to turn around and double dip and ask businesses to pay a reverse toll in order for their products to load quickly to get in the fast lane on the internet.
Yeah, but that's a great gig if you can get it. I mean, honestly and truthfully, I don't blame Comcast and AT&T and Verizon for wanting this. This is a huge boon for the CEOs, for the investors. I mean, this is great for their business. Now, the rest of us are going to get screwed, but for them, this is going to be great.
Well, it might be great for them for their bottom line, but in reality, is it great for the U.S.? No, it absolutely isn't. Is it great for small business? No, it absolutely isn't. It means those companies are controlling what we see, how we pay, everything. They're controlling everything. And that in no way is American, and that is no way fair for small business or competitive in the long run. It really means that you're cutting down on small businesses' ability to compete.
I agree with you, but here's the thing. I mean, the ideal of what we stand for as a nation is to have a free and open internet. But the reality is when it comes down to it, it's all about profits and business, and that's what's really important. And this is what business wants. Evidently, the big ISP folks, they want this. So I'm of the mindset, Trump was put into place with an FCC guy who's going to give it to him. We're kind of screwed, don't you think?
No, I don't think so. I think there's a lot of outcry. Dozens and dozens of internet companies, the smaller guys, came out against this. Huge tech companies came out against this. The only people that want these rules are those big guys that are going to be able to charge everybody left and right for access to websites.
No, I mean, I've been saying, as a small business owner myself and someone who does, my program on the internet, the reality is the end of net neutrality would silence anything that I do or anyone who does what I do almost immediately, because you're never going to be able to pay to be able to get to the speeds that you would need to be able to reach people. I mean, you already see on Facebook a lot of what's happened. To me, Facebook is kind of what the future is going to be if we allow this net neutrality to go by the wayside.
Well, I think that's right. I think that's exactly right. Most small businesses would never be able to afford to enter the fast lane fast enough to get people to stay on their websites. There have been a couple of studies that shows that consumers, when they go on a website, expect it to load in 2 seconds. If it's not loaded by 3 seconds, they exit out.
Yep.
Let's say you just started a clothing company. You want to compete with, the boutique down the street that's maybe owned by Amazon, since Amazon's buying up everything. You will never have a chance. You can't afford those bottom lines. It's really bad for entrepreneurs. It's really bad for consumers. It takes away choice for consumers. Your abundance of choice is suddenly limited down to the few folks who can afford to pay that much to reach you online. It's generally a very aggressive step.
No, I mean, but again, it's all for the profiteers. And I go back to, the conversation I believe we should really be having is, you pointed out something, which is absolutely true. If a website doesn't load within, a second, 2, 3, you're moving on. Our internet in this country is slower than, I guess we're like 15th, 16th now in the world with internet access speeds. The real discussion should be, how do we invest in the infrastructure and more choices and more providers to get us the speeds and the competition that they claim they want. To get us, up to, I don't even want to be 1 or 2. 5 would be okay for me.
That's right. And, that's one of the common arguments in favor of eliminating net neutrality rules, right? These big companies come out and say that it means we can't invest more in infrastructure, and it means that we won't have as much to put into building our companies. But in fact, in 2014, shortly after the open internet rules were announced, Verizon had a spokesperson going to their stakeholders meeting where they're legally obligated to tell the truth. And he said, this isn't going to hinder any of our investments in Fios. It's not going to hinder any of our investments in improving the wires and fibers that we use for reaching customers. So really that argument doesn't hold water.
No, I mean, it's about the money. I mean, it's like a lot of things. I mean, you think just something very simple. Occam's razor. You go, the reality is it's usually the simplest answer. And the simplest answer is it's about the money.
It is absolutely about the money. There's no other way around it. This benefits, 3 or 4 big companies. 9 out of 10 households in the U.S. have 1 or 2 cable options. We're all paying into these guys' pockets. And they just want to get everybody to double pay. Yep. That's exactly right.
So what are you telling your members? I mean, because look, last Wednesday was net neutrality, a day of action. There were 100 and some thousand websites and numerous groups across the country and across the world who are saying, "Hey, U.S., don't be stupid." What are you telling your member folks? What are you telling the folks what are you telling the Main Street Alliance folks to be doing?
So there are a couple things you can do. Of course, you can call in to your congresspeople, and then the John Oliver Show, funnily enough, set up a website that makes it really simple to write into the FCC comment line. It's gofccyourself.com, and it directs you directly to where you can comment in support of net neutrality and against repealing those regulations. But we're also making the bigger picture argument that we need to be thinking about what kind of government do we need to support small business, and what do we want the government to do to support small business. And one of the things is to preserve regulations like open internet, like net neutrality, that enable competition, that level the playing field for small businesses, and that promote small guys stepping out on their own, starting a business online, being able to reach more customers than right outside their immediate community. I mean, that's what small businesses need more than anything. It's just more customers. Right. And the internet makes that possible.
You sure they don't need tax cuts?
They definitely do not need tax cuts.
I mean, because
I'm told
you just went against a couple of right-wing frames there. You're promoting regulation. You're talking about more customers. You're not talking tax cuts and deregulation. What's wrong with you?
Well, I think first of all, we shouldn't talk about this as deregulation. I mean, what we're doing is saying we don't want the government to regulate it. We want private companies to regulate the internet. Second of all, I work with dozens of small business owners every day. Routinely, I never hear we need tax cuts. We can't pay as much in tax. We hear we need more customers, and we need more customers with more money to spend at our business. And that's a huge, big picture thing that we're working on. But fundamentally, one of the ways that we want the government to promote that is to make sure that small businesses can reach customers everywhere.
And you don't have to pay for the access of getting to them. And again, this, to me, another one of these really bad ideas, but it's sold to us as freedom. Angela, this is, we're taking back our freedom and our liberty. We should want this, especially from the Russians.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it cuts both ways. We want to be free from paying left and right for basic internet access. I mean, like you mentioned, in Canada, in the EU, in Chile, in Albania, there are net neutrality rules to prevent companies and prevent the government from strangling the internet, from deciding what people see and when. We don't want to end up in a position like Russia and China, where a couple of folks are deciding what everybody can see. I just don't see how that's democratic. I don't see how that's good for small business. I don't see how anybody is in favor of that. No. It's baffling to me that people who are so in favor of choice, or I want to say choice in quote marks here, choice and freedom and open internet, all of it in quotes, are really making arguments to these big giant companies that have no interest in their well-being, but really in their own pocket.
Again, it does come back down to the simplest answer, which is about the money. And as my grandfather always said, if a rich guy's going to pull a buck out of his pocket to tell you don't need something, you better spend two to get it. And I look at the amount of money that Comcast and AT&T and Verizon and their lobbying arms have spent on this, and it is obscene. It's
obscene. And you really have to think that the chairman of the FCC right now, Ajit Pai, he comes from Verizon, a background with Verizon. He's very openly pro-merger, very openly anti-regulation, anti-good regulation. So that's the driving force right now behind this attempt to repeal. What's really nerve-wracking is that not only does he want to remove the 2015 Open Internet Order, but he also wants to remove the FCC's ability to enact to follow up on the laws, to make sure that companies are obeying internet laws.
Yeah, to enforce anything. Because, why do we want a government agency that has an enforcement arm?
Exactly. That and to prohibit them from, in the future, reversing some of this. So it's a double threat.
Yeah. So last question I've got for you, Angela, because at the end of the day, it's going to take, if this is going to be saved. And look, I'm a little pessimistic because, as you pointed out, a former Verizon lawyer who, once he's done being the head of the FCC, will probably, like all good swinging door agencies, end up back somewhere in that industry. He wants to make a good living at the end of it. I'm not all that hopeful that this doesn't end. But what are we having people do? What can help us maintain and save this?
Like I said, you can go to gofccyourself.com, submit a comment. You can email the FCC directly. I think there's a link on that website as well. You can speak out to your Congress people. The Net Neutrality Day of Action that happened last week was a really good opportunity. I'm sure in the future that there will be similar opportunities. This issue isn't going away. It's really critical. And, Pai wants to make a good living. He's making a great living. We all want to make a good living. Small business owners want to make a good living. I mean, that's fundamental to the American dream, that we all want to be able to prosper if we work hard and participate in our communities and engage on the civic level. But when we give big merged companies so much power over something as fundamental as the internet, we're really reducing the people's ability to do that.
Yeah, and just so you know, the Go FCC yourself site took forever to load.
Well, there you go. There you go.
Just saying. Angela, I appreciate the time. I appreciate the thoughts.
Thank you so much.
Would love to talk to you again real soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Rick.
Great talking with you. Again, if you want to check out their website, we'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com. Highly suggest, Go FCC yourself, or the one that I used, dearfcc.org, to make your comments and have them them heard, seen, and possibly published in the Federal Registry along with your home address, your phone number, your place of employment, and as Victoria said, your bra size. There you go. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. This is The Rick Smith Show for working people.
7, yeah, and I'll go to work at 9. I got no time for living, yes, I'm working all the time. It seems to me I could live my life a lot better than I think I am. I guess that's why they call me the working man.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. The Teamster members of Local 574 in Minneapolis were back out on strike. Their strike had begun 2 months prior on May 16th. The striking Teamsters had effectively shut down much of the commercial transportation in the city. One exception was made for some farmers who were allowed to bring their produce to market. The powerful Citizens Alliance, created to oppose and destroy unions, tried to defeat the strike. The police clashed violently with the strikers, who tried to keep scab drivers from breaking through their picket lines. As the strike entered its second week, other unions began to strike in support of the Teamsters. Clashes between the police and workers intensified. Minneapolis labor leaders sat down with the police and proposed a truce. The governor of Minnesota, Floyd Olson, helped to arbitrate an agreement. The Teamsters won union recognition and the right for all strikers to return to work, as well as a system of recognizing seniority. On May 25th, they called off the strike and went back to work. But soon the employers began to backpedal on the agreement. They claimed that the negotiations did not include the workers inside warehouses and only covered those who drove and unloaded vehicles. Angered, the Teamsters went back out on strike. Soon, violent clashes between the picketers and police broke out again. 2 workers were shot in the back and killed. The governor declared martial law and sent in the National Guard to restore order. A federal mediator brokered another settlement meeting the major demands of the union. It was a major victory for the Teamsters and a major victory for the workers of Minneapolis and beyond. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania
happen! Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
What the hell we fighting for? Just surrender and it won't hurt at all. Just got time to say your prayer while you're waiting for the hammer.
Welcome back to the RickSmithShow.com. Yes, FCC, dearfcc.org, the website. Make sure you take a look at that. Have your thoughts, your questions, have your all out there. Because as I've been saying, we need to save the free and open internet. And look, there's a lot of nonsense on the internet. There is. And there's a lot of nonsense in public. And I think Angela made a really, really important point. And it's the point that I make all the time when you're talking about, the deregulation fetish people. Somebody is going to regulate everything. It's going to happen. One way or another, it will get regulated. This idea that I'll have the freedom because I'm this great individual is not accurate. Somebody is going to regulate what happens on the internet. Will it be government? Will it be private corporations? Will it at some point down the road, if Mike Pence gets his way, be churches? Don't know. But someone does. And I have always been of the mindset that I would prefer to have government of, for, and by we the people. Led by people who have to stand before us every 2, 4, or 6 years for election to justify what they've done. I would rather have them regulating, deciding, controlling what happens. I don't necessarily like the idea of CEOs and backroom board of directors making these decisions without any accountability or thought to we the people. Now, you've got folks who go, no, Rick, you're wrong. Because they are accountable. They're accountable to their shareholders who are accountable to their customers because they want to make money. The consumer is the ultimate power in this country. And the difference is which side of that divide do you fall? Is it a voter, the voter who has citizenship rights in this country, or is it the consumer based on how many dollars they have and how much they can spend and how much they can influence through this? So which is it? I mean, again, who decides who gets what? This is the bizarre world in which we now find ourselves. And again, I come back to the side of we the people, this wonderful experiment of self-governance, self-rule, making the rules that we want enacted. We want safe workplaces. We want safe neighborhoods. We want good schools. We want health care for folks. These are things that we should be fighting for. Yet what you've got is an elected class who isn't listening to us because things are so badly gerrymandered. You've got so many hands in what we do. I mean, I was talking about this over the weekend, and it was one of these moments where there's got to be a way at which, because you go back to the last election, you were just inundated with nonsense, inundated with what I would even call fake news. You were inundated constantly with all of these, did you know Hillary or did you know Donald? And you go, no. There's part of me that goes, during an election cycle, there's got to be a way to stop the outside interference. And I know the First Amendment, people have the right to speak and all this stuff, but there's got to be a way at saying you can't use a candidate's name unless it's somewhat accurate or it's even tied to the campaign. Maybe, I don't know the answer, but the reality is, and this was some of the arguments I got from people who were saying, you just want Russia to be able to flood us with nonsense. With a free and open internet, you're going to have this kind of stuff happen. How do we filter out the insanity? Is it us? Does it have to be us through an engaged, informed, critical thinking electorate? I like to believe that. Or is it some form of censorship that says, no, you can't have just out and out blatant lies? I would love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, because look, the idea of having an internet that is censored by a government who has a want, a need for our votes, I struggle with, because we know government propaganda is generally effusive with praise for those who are in power. And generally, they go after the people who are not. I mean, look at what's going on with Obamacare. It's failing, death spiral. Yet we know, no, not failing, not death spiral, actually doing what it was meant to do. Had over the last 6-7 years, we tweaked it and made it better. It would be much better, but no. We had an obstructionist party who said, no, we're doing nothing. We're gonna obstruct, delay, and then repeal. And then replace with what? Oh my gosh. I mean, really, did you really think during the election that they would be so incompetent and so off on the fringe that they can't even get, when they hold the majority, they can't even get their vision passed through? And the reality is they don't have a vision. Their vision is tax cuts for rich people, which is why there's part of me that thinks maybe someone planted the blood clot in McCain's eye. I'm kidding. It's a joke. There's part of me that goes, there's somehow to slow this train wreck down, McCain going away was probably the best thing that happened to him. Gave him an excuse to, well, we don't want to slow down and let John come back. John McCain, who's got great health care, doesn't have to worry while he's laying in bed after having the surgery on the blood clot if he can pay for it. That John McCain. And I don't know if you saw the article over the weekend in the New York Times. One of those moments where you go, and again, here on the program, been talking about this for months now. The idea of going back to these horrible, crummy micro plans. And, now with the Cruz Amendment, making sure that that's going to happen. And again, I've been saying this for a while, going back to this horrible kind of, warm, fuzzy feeling. We've got the, we've got the card. It doesn't pay for anything, but we got a card. Over the weekend, the New York Times had an article that went through this and told some stories of the kid who, I think he had leukemia. Turns out his health insurance paid for exactly $2,000 a year worth of treatment. Exactly $2,000. And you go, what? Leukemia treatment is, a couple $100,000. Where'd the rest of that come from? Oh yeah, it didn't. And didn't care. And I keep coming back to understand where we've been. And this is where the history of our healthcare is fairly important. The warm, fuzzy feeling of I have my plan and I like it is kind of disingenuous. I mean, because look, we have a system, and I've said this before 1,000 times. We have a system that's set up where we, the people, pay for the sick. We pay for the elderly. We pay for children. We pay for people who actually use health care. And we do a lot of that, which is why the cuts to Medicaid that they're proposing would be so disastrous and would raise our premiums as well. It would skyrocket, the people who have employer-based health care. So we already have a system set up where we take the young and the old, the people who use health care, and we pay for that. We give the private insurers the ability to pick and choose of the deserving. Because if you got a pre-existing condition, sorry, not going to cover that. So we take the healthy people who have jobs, who can go to work every day and function and all of that, and we give them health care, and we let them go to their doctor for their checkup once a year where they go in and look, it's this simple. I've never had a cavity. So going to the dentist for me is always a 10-minute, 15-minute. They clean, they polish, they whatever. Doctor comes in, looks around. Oh, you're good. See you in 6 months. Going to the dentist for me is great. Love it. I've never had any problems. Love my dentist. Want to keep him. I got to be honest. If I had, as some people I know, every 6 months you're going, well, it looks like another cavity's developed. We're gonna have to drill and fill. I'd hate the dentist. And then I would hate the fact that the dental insurance that I have doesn't cover anything. Because it'll cover the cleanings, it'll cover your checkup, but you start getting into actual work, doesn't cover anything. Now you go, that warm, fuzzy feeling, and I love my dentist, and all that, kind of goes away when you start going, this is going to be thousands of dollars. I've always said, look, that card in your wallet, the warm, fuzzy feeling you get should be actually functional. You go to the doctor, you need care, you get it. It doesn't break you. Now, I go back to, we take care of the young, the old, we take care of the sick. As soon as I have to start paying for something, let's say, I can't work anymore. No more job. No more health insurance. And there's some who go, wow, you just go on, one of these programs. Good luck with that. I don't know if any of you have tried. Hoops, lots of hoops. Put in place by conservatives who want to make sure that, people aren't cheating the system. So we have this grand Band-Aid hodgepodge kind of structure for healthcare, where we talk about the deserving and the undeserving. We talk about the young and the old, and sacrosanct, and until now, where we're going to cut Medicaid. And guess what? We have one of the highest infant mortality rates in the world. That can only go up. And why? And I keep coming back to the why. Why is simple. More tax cuts. That's it. Simplest explanation. More tax cuts for the people who don't need it. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Businessmen got richer, they laid their future plans. They saw that food was everything to man. And maybe then they had a thought, help the poorest folks, but it only brought more money to their hands. And the boys were getting poorer, people turned away, not able to admit the way they planned. It's taking all the soul away from everything they grew. They can't have the legs on which to stand.
Uncovering the con in conservatism. Rick Smith.
Ice shelves there and elsewhere around Antarctica are really kind of the canaries in the coal mine.
Iceberg the size of Delaware finally breaks off of Antarctica.
The system will be 3 times more powerful than any system on Earth.
Tesla will build the world's biggest battery in 100 days, or it's free. Trump's EPA moves to revive the controversial Pebble mine in Alaska. Plus, France moves to phase out coal and the internal combustion engine.
All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Ever since the last ice age ended about 40,000 years ago, we've been warming ever since then. So we're continuing, and the Earth goes through these cycles where we cool and we warm, and that's what we are right now. We're on a warming trend.
Hey, James Quinones, weatherman from KPNX in Phoenix. Why don't you learn what the hell you're talking about before you go on the air and misinform Phoenix? This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, Phoenix just went through one of their worst heat waves ever, and you've got weathermen either not explaining what's going on to the people of Phoenix or just lying to them like James Quinones. Sorry, it makes me really angry.
Yeah, I can tell.
I'm not even a weatherman, but I try to learn what the hell I'm talking about before I say it. Anyway, what do you have for us today in the Green News Report?
Well,
And don't screw it up.
Well, one of the largest icebergs ever recorded just broke free from Antarctica. According to British scientists and NASA satellite images, the much-watched, fast-growing crack across the massive Larsen C ice shelf finally broke off sometime between Monday and Wednesday, calving an iceberg the size of Delaware, more than 600 feet deep, containing enough ice to cover all 50 states in more than 4 inches of ice. It's so big that maps of Antarctica will have to be revised. It won't raise sea levels by itself because the ice shelf was already sitting in the water, but its loss will likely accelerate the slide of land ice behind it into the sea. It's a further sign that Antarctica's ice sheets are destabilizing.
Now, there is some controversy about whether this would have happened with or without global warming. Is there anything definitive yet either way?
As of now, there's no consensus. There's disagreement among scientists, but it is consistent with what they've predicted.
So when there's no facts to support something, we don't claim there is. At the same time, when there are facts to support something, we don't lie about it to the public. James Quinones, weatherman of KPNX in Phoenix.
Meanwhile, the Environmental Protection Agency is taking a first step in reviving the controversial proposed Pebble mine in Alaska's Bristol Bay watershed. That's despite overwhelming opposition from residents, tribes, environmental groups, and the commercial fishing industry, and despite being rejected by the Obama administration on the grounds that the mine's toxic waste would harm the world's largest salmon fishery. The EPA has opened up a new public comment period for folks to weigh in on whether they think that mine should go forward.
Well, poisoning the food supply is one thing. Making money is another. Keep your priorities straight, Ms. Doyen.
In Australia, Tesla CEO Elon Musk is making good on his offer to build the world's biggest battery for the province of South Australia.
Cool.
South Australia suffered massive blackouts earlier this year after a tropical storm downed power lines, and Australia's conservative leadership falsely blamed that on renewable energy. Musk has now signed a contract to build a $50 million battery system in 100 days, or it's free. In a press conference, Musk said he made the bet to prove the concept.
And to prove that the people who were blaming renewable energy were wrong.
There was really this opportunity to make a significant statement about renewable energy to the world, to show that you can really do a heavy-duty, large-scale utility-level battery system.
In China, a rural province served as a real-world testing ground to prove that it is possible to switch to 100% renewable energy on a regional scale. For a full week in mid-June, 6 million people in a rural region in northwest China used only renewable energy, hydroelectric, wind, and solar power for all of their electricity needs. It was an amount equivalent to burning more than 500,000 tons of coal. The test reportedly came off without a hitch, with no grid reliability issues and without all the pollution. Finally, France has announced it will phase out all internal combustion engines by 2040. It's part of a new series of energy measures unveiled by French President Emmanuel Macron to make his country carbon neutral by 2050. France will also stop granting licenses for new oil and gas exploration and will phase out coal for generating electricity by 2022.
Wow, the rest of the world is doing some fascinating things when it comes to renewable energy.
Yes, they are.
Thank you very much. For more on all of these stories and the many that we didn't have time for, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us, follow us, and share us worldwide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Phoenix from the flames, we will rise together. They will know our names.
R-O-C-K in the USA. R-O-C-K in the USA. R-O-C-K in the USA.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So Walter Schraub, S-H-A-U-B, Schraub, I guess. He's the outgoing chief of the Government Ethics Office. Remember, you may remember, and I know it was a long time ago, 6 months. I know that January 20th was forever ago. At least it seems like it to me. It seems like a whole lifetime. The first thing the Republicans wanted to do was do away with the Office of Ethics, the Government Ethics Office, if you remember. And that was the first kind of rallying point where people were going, no, bad idea. Unfortunately, our voices stopped the destruction of that. But you've got Schraub saying, look, it's hard for the United States to pursue international anti-corruption and ethics initiatives when we're not even keeping our side of the street clean. He goes on to say, look, this all of the president running around to his resorts and promoting his enterprises, it's affecting, according to him, it's affecting our credibility. He says, I think we're pretty close to a laughingstock at this point. And I'd go, wow. And here's a guy who's very thoughtful. He's going, look, I think we're pretty close. I would argue we're there. I would argue dead smack there. But here's the thing, Schraub thinks that, going on these trips to his own businesses, Mar-a-Lago, the Southern White House, this past weekend, I was at the Women's U.S. Open, then off to his golf course. Do you remember the good old days when Donald Trump was mocking, and the conservatives were mocking President Obama for going golfing? Remember that? This guy's already gone golfing more than Obama did during 8 years. Understand, this guy's... Again, facts be damned. Schraub went on to say it creates an appearance of profiting from the presidency. And I believe that, Trump was all about self-promotion. It's all about, hey, how do we make money? How do we promote the product? We knew this during the election. He goes on to say misuse of position is really the heart of the ethics program, and internationally accepted definitions of corruption is abuse of entrusted power. He says it undermines the government ethics program by casting doubt on the integrity of government decision making. I agree. What happens and what's going on is you've got a president who puts people, and again, this comes back to that, which side of the divide do you fall on? Do you believe in good governance? Do you believe in policy and regulations that protect consumers, workers, citizens? Or is it really only about business friendly? It's about the jobs. And as we talked about last week, he wants to put someone in charge of the wage theft division who is committing wage theft. Now you see that the president wants to put someone in charge of, and you just almost go, this can't be possible. I mean, honestly and truthfully, this can't be what we're talking about doing. But now he's talking about putting the woman who's in charge of the, she's the comptroller in Texas. She's the chief architect of, in Texas, they used to have, an agency that oversaw endangered species programs. It was the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department that had, made sure that, hey, if we've got something that's endangered, we want to protect it. She was the key back in 2011 of getting control of endangered species and that issue away from the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department and putting it into the comptroller's office. She's someone who is, and the headline read, a fierce critic of the Endangered Species Act. Someone who is, as Senator John Cornyn points out, a fierce advocate for rural Texans. She will promote pro-growth policies as she has done in one of the largest economies in the nation. Clear record of promoting pro-growth, and that means, you know what? If that endangered species is in the way, well, better luck next time. We're just going to run it right over. Now, the Trump people want to put her in charge of, well, she's going to work within the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, is an agency in the Department of Interior where Trump wants to put her. Her job will be to implement policies that affect endangered species. And somehow we're shocked. We're surprised. Shouldn't be. Should not be at all. And again, it comes back to you've got a guy head of the Department of Energy wanted to eliminate it. You've got a guy in Scott Pruitt at the EPA who doesn't believe in it. Now you got. How much more? How much more do you need? The struggle just nuts. And look, I mean, this is Made in America week, as was pointed out earlier, and I'm all in favor of it. Have always been in favor of making things domestic production, domestic consumption. Big fan. I'm not sure when we declared this week. Was this something he thought of last week? I don't actually know. In fact, yesterday, as I was reading through some articles, I was going, really? Wasn't it just Buy American Week not too long ago? But this is Made in America Week, and I'm thrilled with it. And I thought, maybe, Donald should start right at home. Because I've been looking online to try and find things that Donald Trump, because Victoria Jones earlier said that there are some things that Donald makes that are made in the U.S. I haven't found it. And you would think that if there were, they might be on the lawn. Maybe today, maybe we'll find something today. But, the clothing items that we saw, China, Mexico, his use of Chinese-made steel and aluminum in his buildings, saw that. I don't remember seeing anything where you go, yep, this is what I made in the U.S. I don't see it. Now, the daughter, Ivanka, evidently nothing. Evidently nothing is made in the U.S. Everything's made in countries like Bangladesh, Indonesia, and China. And that's not surprising, especially for the woman who said that it's her goal to improve the lives of women while being, as it's being reported, one of the worst employers in the area. So are we surprised? I'm not, and nor should we be. Now, for me, as we talked about on our weekly TV show last weekend, I was on board with the trade talk. let's have a trade policy that brings jobs back. Will those questions be asked this week? Will we talk about how we can have procurement policies that encourage U.S. consumption and production? Don't know. I see this as just jingoism. I see this as an opportunity to promote friendly products of his. I see this as an opportunity to, well, change the message, because everybody should be behind Buy American. Everybody. So when you look at this, and again, I guess I am questioning the motives. I actually am. It's like last week, over the weekend, with all the talk of what was going on with Junior, Trump tweets out, a military image, and you go, is this kind of jingoistic patriotism to get us to ignore everything else that's going on? Because it just seemed bizarre out of nowhere. And they do a lot of this stuff. It's not even dog whistle anymore. It's just, hey, shiny thing. And like dogs, we snap too and ignore everything else. I got a great dog. She's fantastic. You pull out a treat, everything else in the world ends. And again, my view, that's what a lot of this stuff is meant to do to us. It's good training. Good training. Let's take a quick break. Right back to wrap things up. Stick around. This is the Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1944. A crew of mostly black soldiers were loading munitions onto ships at the Port Chicago Naval Magazine in California, northeast of Oakland. 320 soldiers were killed by a munitions explosion that wounded another 390 people. Troops were segregated. Black enlisted men were often given the worst and most dangerous non-combat jobs. All of the munition loaders at Port Chicago were African American. Every officer was white. The sailors were not given proper training in the loading of ammunition. The idea of loading munitions scared the soldiers. The officers lied and said the job was safe and that the weapons could not explode. They were wrong. The explosion caused a giant fireball that killed everyone on the ship and on the pier. The explosion could be heard 200 miles away. Of the 320 people killed, 202 were black. Only 51 bodies could be identified. Ordinarily, soldiers traumatized by the death of fellow soldiers were given 30 days leave. None of the black soldiers, not even those who were hospitalized, got leave. All of the white officers did. Surviving soldiers refused to load munitions. For that, they were arrested. 40 were charged with mutiny. The rest of the soldiers were also punished. They were sent to the Pacific Theater, forced to do menial duty. Many received bad conduct discharges at the end of the war, making them ineligible for military benefits. Those charged with mutiny were sentenced to 15 years of hard labor. When World War II ended, the imprisoned soldiers' sentences were reduced to 2 years. And in 1999, President Bill Clinton pardoned one of the survivors, 79-year-old Freddie Meeks. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, for Talk Media News. Is President Trump coming in from the cold? The president is on a state visit to France, and during remarks with President Emmanuel Macron on Thursday, he suggested that the U.S. withdrawal from the Paris Agreement on climate change might not happen after all.
Yeah, I mean, something could happen with respect to the Paris Accord. We'll see what happens. And if it happens, that'll be wonderful. And if it doesn't, that'll be okay, too.
After weekend meetings with members of the G20, perhaps Trump is coming around to the consensus position on climate change. Even House Republicans seem to be doing so. On Thursday, 46 of them voted alongside Democrats to protect a bill that mandates that the Pentagon study the risks posed to the military by climate change. And 8 of the world's largest aid groups have launched a joint appeal to alleviate an ongoing famine in 4 countries. Deepmala Mehila is the country director for Mercy Corps in South Sudan.
The famine-like conditions, what we are seeing right now in South Sudan, Somalia, Northeast Nigeria, and Yemen, is unbelievably urgent and huge in scope. We are talking about 20 million people being on the brink of starvation, and another 80 million people do not know where their next meal is coming from.
Some United Nations humanitarian officials have characterized the current world hunger crisis as one of the worst since World War II. It's a sentiment that Mehila understands.
The situation is more dire than ever. You go to the field, I meet women and families who've lost everything. And when I mean everything, I mean everything.
To lend a hand or donate to famine relief efforts, visit globalemergencyresponse.org. For more global news headlines, visit talkmedianews.com.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
Website, thericksmithshow.com. So this week we'll be on air today and tomorrow. Wednesday, a travel day as we head to the nation's capital for the American Federation of Teachers Teach Conference. We'll be broadcasting there on Thursday and Friday. That should be interesting. It was one of those things that last year had a good time, was an interesting couple of days. And if you remember, the last time we went, we sat down with Randy Weingarten, the president of AFT, and discussed her rationale for being the first union to come out and endorse Hillary Clinton. And again, there are those who are not thrilled with that. And was it the right decision, wrong decision? Don't know. But at the end of it, we've got a president who appointed billionaire Betsy DeVos. And, you understand in hindsight, if you're the leader of that union going, we've got to choose which side we're going to be on because we know the other side's terrible. And everybody knew Trump was going to be horrible for education. And putting Betsy DeVos as head of the Department of Education just proved that. Someone who doesn't believe in public education, someone who wants more voucher and charter money to go to religious schools, not going to uphold any of the LBGT rules. I guess the Civil Rights Department, they're moving to a neutral position because we don't want to stop that stuff. And here just recently, evidently it's kind of mind blowing. In the big headlines, she met with a men's group on rape policy. And, their position was, 99% of all rapes that happen on college campuses are, because everyone was drunk. So it's, never mind, it's okay. Yeah, that's her. Interesting news coming up. Evidently, according to the Commitment to Reduce Inequality, this is one of these programs developed by researchers with Oxfam and the Development Finance International. They say that if the tax cuts that the Donald has put forth, that the Republicans want, if it actually happens, it would make inequality in the U.S. that much worse. In fact, it would cause the country to drop 6 places from its ranking currently of 23rd overall to all the way down to 29th. If the tax reform effort is successful, with the U.S. specific rating on tax policies plummeting 33 places to actually the 59th. I got that wrong. From 26th to 59th. We'd be just below Peru, Chile, and Sri Lanka. Let that sink in for a second. We're number 1, right? We're working on getting number 1 to the bottom. And you go, but here's the thing, we're a rich country. Yeah, we are. We're the richest country in the history of civilization. You wouldn't know it if you went into many places in Appalachia. You wouldn't know it if you go into many places where I grew up in Cleveland. You wouldn't know it if you go into many places across this country. Sad, sad stuff. Again, the headline grabbed you, though. It was, if the proposal it would push us below Greece. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Love to hear your thoughts, questions, comments. Have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow.